Hey everyone, welcome back to Sketch a Day. I'm really excited to talk about a few pencil sketching tips today. Last time I realized I kind of jumped right into pencil without talking about a few tips and tricks that I use as I sketch with pencils, specifically Prismacolor Premier pencils. They're my favorite, along with very thin pencils. I don't really use lead pencils very much. But in any case, just a few tips. I think some of them will apply to other pencil types if you guys are fans of the pencil and sketching with a pencil. So let's get right into it. I'll talk about these tips. Basically, the anatomy of a pencil is such that you have a piece of lead, right? So there's my lead encased in a piece of wood. Right? And this lead kind of gets exposed as you sharpen the pencil. Sounds really stupid, sounds really simple, but it's important to understand your tool if you're going to use it to its fullest potential. Now, the way pencil works is if I have the tip of my pencil and I'm drawing on a piece of paper, say in this direction, every time I make a stroke, I'm depositing some of that material onto the paper. And that's what's going to give me my pigment or my color or my stroke on that piece of paper. Now, if I keep stroking that paper with my pencil, eventually what happens is that lead gets flatter and chubbier and shorter. And so when I create subsequent strokes, so here's a sharp Prismacolor Premier pencil, for example, and I create subsequent strokes. It's sharp right now. Watch what happens as I continually stroke here. You notice that my lines will get thicker and thicker, and sometimes the lead breaks, of course. And again, the reason that happens is I'm just constantly applying the lead in the same direction over and over again. Now, if I actually take my pencil, and this is very subtle, rotate my pencil after each stroke, I'm essentially taking this sharpened bit, right? Because as I draw on the paper, I'm sharpening my tip in one direction. And I rotate that, I'm then able to get a relatively fresh stroke each time. So you can see, just by rotating my pencil, I don't have that problem, or as much of that problem. And I don't have to go back and sharpen as many times. So that's my first tip. The next tip is, what if you have a pencil whose tip constantly seems to be breaking as you sharpen it? So the lead breaks and you go to your sharpener, sharpen it, and for whatever reason the lead falls out again. What do? Well, what you can actually do is something I talked about a few years back on idsketching.com, which is my other website, and that is you can take these Prismacolor Premier pencils, throw them in the microwave for a couple seconds. Now, you don't want to throw it in there for a minute or two and cook the pencil, but what happens is the lead inside of the pencil actually fuses together. So what probably happened and what's probably causing that lead to fall out is impact. So if you drop the pencil on the floor, fling it across the room because you're mad at your sketch, that's going to get broken up into little pieces. So again, this pencil lead on the inside gets broken up. And so by microwaving it, you then are able to, fuse these bits together, and so you create a unified piece of lead. So that's my second tip. For our next tip, it has a little bit more to do with technique and style. So for people starting out with sketching, I typically recommend you start out with something that isn't as forgiving as a pencil, like a Sharpie. So with a Sharpie, I can't really lightly create a line. I'm essentially drawing a whole line. Now, the good thing about practicing with a Sharpie is that it's going to teach you to be very thoughtful about what you're doing. So if I'm sketching something like a cube, for example, I'll have to ghost or hover over the page before I make my first stroke, rotate my page, next stroke, and so forth. Okay, and that's really hard because you're trying to avoid things like that little goober that I put down on the paper there with my one stroke. Now, my tip for pencil is that the stuff you learn when you are practicing with a Sharpie or other felt pen rather, or permanent pen that gives you a whole line, you want to take that same confidence that you have in your stroke and apply it to pencil. So if I'm drawing a cube, I would do it in similar fashion. So here I'm using a very thin, and my lines, they have a certain quality to them that's inherent to the pencil. However, the gesture in my stroke remains just as confident as it did with the pen, so that my lines have a nice, confident quality. And that's really important if you're engaged in visual communication. You want to make sure that your message is confident and consistent. So that's my third tip. My next tip has to do with some quick ways to shade, form, and give dimensionality to objects on your piece of paper. So for example, here's this cube. There's two ways that we can go about shading with this Prismacolor Premier pencil. The first is to take the lead, turn it on its side, and use that as a means of shading. So for example, I can come in here, if this is my shadowed side of the cube, with the lead on the side, and just kind of shade this in. And this is more of a fine art technique, which is fine. It gives definitely a more matte appearance to this cube. And I can come back in, a little bit more pressure, and do the same thing. And this is really useful, again, if you're trying to give a little bit of texture and also just create a nice, even blend. As always, when we shade our three-dimensional form, we want to have some gradient, okay, from dark to light, which gives us a sense of three-dimensionality. The other way to shade with pencil, it's a little bit harder, but I think it gives a fresh feel to whatever you're shading, which is to use what's called a motor stroke. So instead of shading on the side of the pencil, I'm using the tip of the pencil. And after every stroke, lifting the lead of the pencil and stroking again on the paper. Now you might be wondering, is he rotating the pencil after each stroke? In this case, not so much. I'm kind of rotating after a few strokes, okay? And for those long strokes, I slow down just a little bit. All right, so this is particularly useful if you want to communicate a surface quality that is a little bit more glossy or reflective. And I can come in here with a little bit more pressure toward that top corner, for example. Get really dark and fade out to light. So that's my second tip, how to shade with pencil. And you can see there's two different qualities to both these sides. Okay, the third tip with shading is if you have something that is cylindrical, as one example, or organic. In case you're wondering, that was my pencil that fell on the ground, so I'll probably have to go microwave that in a little bit to fix it. If I have these two shapes and I want to just quickly give it some form, I can take the tip of my pencil here and turn it on its side and just kind of work in a shadow core and then fade out from that shadow core. Okay? And so what I've done is I've quickly indicated or shown that this shape on the page has a nice form to it. Okay? And the reason for that, again, in case you're wondering and you're totally confused, just watch my video where I talk about how to shade or properly light a cylinder, and this will make sense. So I have a shadow core, I've got some reflected light here, here's my shadow core, and then I've got some shadow, and you could, continue to fade this and work this in to where there's a little bit of a highlight right here. But you can see really quickly I've given the shape some form, and we can reinforce that with contour lines, of course, if need be. With a cylinder, you can do the same thing. Just pencil on the side, quick shadow core here, and opposite my highlight, really light secondary shadow core and blend toward the middle. And that would give me a very quick shading of a cylinder. So that's my last tip for you guys. And certainly there's other things that will come up, and I might do another video that goes a little bit more in depth into pencil as a tool specifically, but these are just a few tricks and tips that I've used over the years to create my sketches that I think would be beneficial to all of you. Well, thanks again for watching. It's been fun. I'm, as always, excited about the next video. This has been a really great experience. If you can take a minute, just subscribe to my channel, and that way you'll be the first to know when I post a new video. You can also follow me and find me on Instagram at sketchaday.com or on facebook.com/sketchaday. And that's all one word. And that way you can interact with me, post a comment, send a message, that kind of thing. And I'll do my best to respond. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you guys next time on Sketchaday.